My girlfriend cheated on me with a married man, so I got revenge by sleeping with his wife. My name's Lucas, and I'm 23 years old. I've always thought of myself as a decent guy, trying to make a living and keep things simple. My girlfriend Bella is 21, beautiful, vibrant, and someone I thought I knew completely. Until one night, everything changed and my world came crashing down. It started like any other evening. Bella and I had planned to have a quiet dinner at home. We had been together for nearly 2 years, and while the spark had dimmed a little, I believed our bond was solid. I came home early that day, excited to surprise her with her favorite meal. As I unlocked the front door, I felt a strange sense of unease, an inexplicable tension in the air. I shrugged it off and walked inside. The house was eerily quiet. Bella wasn't in the kitchen where I had expected her to be. I called out her name, but there was no response. My heart began to race as I walked through the rooms, searching for any sign of her. When I reached the bedroom, the sight that met my eyes was something I will never forget. Bella's phone was lying on the bed, buzzing with a notification. As I picked it up, I noticed a message preview on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight, love." It was from a number I didn't recognize. Confused and uneasy, I opened the message, only to find a string of intimate and affectionate texts between Bella and someone named James. My heart sank as I read through the messages. James was 31 years old, an age difference that seemed significant compared to my 23 years. The messages were filled with declarations of love, promises of future plans, and detailed descriptions of their meetings. My stomach twisted in knots as I realized that Bella had been lying to me about where she was going and who she was spending time with. I tried to keep my composure, but my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I needed to know more, so I scrolled through the entire conversation. Each message felt like a stab to the heart. It became clear that Bella had been seeing James behind my back for months. The betrayal was more than just a physical act. It was the emotional deceit, the manipulation, and the complete disregard for the trust we had built. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what I had just discovered. How could Bella do this to me? We had shared dreams, laughter, and even some tears. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real, or so I thought. As the shock began to settle in, a wave of anger surged through me. I felt a desperate need to confront Bella, demand answers, and to understand how she could have been so cruel. I quickly dialed Bella's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic gripped me as I realized she must have been with James at that very moment. I drove to the address that James had mentioned in their texts, hoping to catch them in the act. My thoughts were a whirlwind of betrayal and confusion, and I couldn't believe this was happening to me. When I arrived at the location, a small, upscale hotel, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. My hands trembled as I approached the entrance, every step feeling heavier than the last. I knew I shouldn't have been there, but I had to confront them. The realization that the life I thought I knew was a lie was almost too much to bear. As I stood outside the hotel room door, I could hear Bella's laughter and James's voice. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I knocked on the door, and the sound of shuffling inside made my heart race even faster. When the door finally opened, Bella's face was a mask of shock and guilt. James stood behind her, his expression one of silent acknowledgement. Confrontation was as painful as I had imagined. Bella's eyes welled up with tears as she tried to explain, but her words were empty. I couldn't process everything she was saying. All I felt was the deep, gnawing pain of betrayal. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship was shattered, and the love I had for Bella felt like a distant memory. In that moment, I realized that the person I thought I knew and loved was someone completely different. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the lies, deceit, and the complete disregard for the person I was. My world had been turned upside down, and all I wanted was to find some semblance of normalcy in the chaos. As I walked away from the hotel, leaving Bella and James behind, I felt a profound emptiness. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming, and the future that I had envisioned with Bella seemed like a cruel joke. I knew I had to find a way to move forward, but for now, all I could do was grapple with the raw, aching hurt that consumed me. The discovery of Bella's affair was only the beginning. It was the start of a journey filled with heartache, anger, and a quest for vengeance. Little did I know that this was just the first step in a much more complicated and emotionally charged path. I spent the entire night tossing and turning, unable to escape the relentless ache in my chest. Pain from Bella's betrayal felt like a physical weight, crushing me under its pressure. My mind was a chaotic storm of hurt, anger, and a growing need for revenge. I knew I couldn't let this betrayal go unanswered. I needed to act, to take control, and to make Bella and James feel the sting of their actions. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose. The emotional storm had settled into a cold, calculated resolve. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could make them pay. The realization hit me hard. If I wanted to exact my revenge, I needed to target James, and more importantly, his wife. As the day progressed, I found myself obsessively gathering information. I discovered that James was married to a woman named Sarah. From the little I knew about her, gathered from their messages, she seemed like a caring, devoted wife who was completely oblivious to her husband's infidelity. It made my plan even more complicated, and, in a twisted way, more satisfying. I wasn't just going after James. I was going to make sure that Sarah, too, felt the pain and betrayal I was experiencing. I started by researching Sarah's daily routine. It wasn't difficult to find out where she worked or her usual activities. I followed her discreetly, learning her habits and figuring out the best times to make my move. Each piece of information I uncovered only fueled my desire for revenge. I envisioned how Sarah would react when she discovered the truth about her husband, and the thought gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. One evening, after days of meticulous planning, I decided it was time to put my plan into action. I knew that confronting Sarah directly would be risky. It needed to be done in a way that would have the maximum impact, a way that would ensure that James and Bella both knew that their actions had consequences. My plan was to seduce Sarah, make her feel the same sense of betrayal that I had felt, and to do it in a manner that would be impossible for James to ignore. I managed to find out that Sarah often visited a local coffee shop in the late afternoon. I decided to visit the same place, hoping to bump into her and strike up a conversation. My heart raced as I walked into the cafe, scanning the room for her familiar face. After a few minutes, I spotted her at a corner table, engrossed in a book. The sight of her, so unsuspecting and serene, made my resolve harden. I approached her with a casual smile, trying to appear friendly and non-threatening. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding. "I couldn't help but notice that you're reading one of my favorite books. May I join you?" Sarah looked up, her eyes bright and welcoming. She seemed genuinely pleased by the interaction. "Sure, I'd love some company," she replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. As we talked, I carefully crafted my persona: charming, attentive, and considerate. I knew that the more genuine I appeared, the easier it would be to manipulate her feelings. I shared bits of my life, stories that were just personal enough to seem real, but not so detailed that they could be easily checked. I wanted to create an illusion of trust and intimacy. Over the next few weeks, I continued to meet Sarah regularly. Each encounter was carefully orchestrated to build rapport and deepen our connection. I listened to her, offered support, and slowly began to introduce subtle flirtations into our conversations. I could see the changes in her demeanor. Her initial hesitance gave way to a growing sense of comfort and affection. She began to confide in me, sharing more about her life, frustrations, and her feelings about her marriage. The more time we spent together, the clearer it became that Sarah was feeling a genuine connection with me. I knew I was treading dangerous waters, but the sense of power and control was intoxicating. My anger towards James and Bella was transforming into a cold, calculated pursuit of revenge. One evening, as we shared a quiet dinner at a cozy restaurant, I decided it was time to make my move. The atmosphere was intimate, and Sarah seemed more relaxed than ever. I reached across the table, lightly touching her hand, and looked into her eyes. The vulnerability in her gaze was evident, and I knew that this was the moment to push further. "Sarah?" I said softly, my voice filled with a feigned sincerity. "I've really enjoyed getting to know you. I feel a strong connection between us, and I can't help but wonder if you feel the same way." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment I could see the conflict within her. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I do feel something," she admitted quietly. "I didn't expect this, but I feel a connection with you too." It was a delicate moment, one that could have easily gone awry. But as I leaned in and kissed her, I felt a mix of triumph and guilt. I was about to betray her trust just as James had betrayed mine. It was a painful reminder of how far I had fallen from the person I used to be, consumed by the desire for revenge. The affair with Sarah continued, each encounter intensifying the emotional turmoil for both of us. I could see the pain in her eyes, and it made the act of revenge feel even more satisfying. At the same time, I was haunted by the knowledge that I was causing someone else the same kind of anguish that had been inflicted upon me. The plan was working. James would soon discover the affair, and I hoped that the resulting chaos would make him fully grasp the consequences of his action. I wanted him to understand the depth of the pain he had caused, to experience a fraction of the devastation I felt. As I continued with my scheme, I couldn't help but reflect on the path I had chosen. Revenge was consuming me, driving me to acts I had never imagined I would be capable of. I was no longer just a victim of betrayal. I was a perpetrator of it, and it left me feeling both powerful and hollow. The days that followed were a blur of deceit and emotional manipulation. I had achieved my goal of getting close to Sarah, but the cost of my actions weighed heavily on me. The line between justice and vengeance had blurred, and I found myself questioning the true price of my revenge. In the end, it was clear that my plan was taking a toll on everyone involved. The pain of betrayal was spreading, and I was at the center of it all, orchestrating a cruel twist of fate. The consequences of my actions were beginning to unfold, and the emotional fallout was far from over. The nights I spent with Sarah were a tangled web of emotions, passion, guilt, and a growing sense of despair. What began as a calculated plan for revenge had evolved into a deeply complicated affair. Each encounter with Sarah only seemed to deepen the emotional turmoil, not just for her, but for me as well. It was a Friday evening when we decided to meet at a secluded beach, a spot Sarah had mentioned during our conversation. It was supposed to be a place where she could escape the pressures of her life and find some tranquility. I thought it would be the perfect setting for the next stage of my plan. As I arrived at the beach, the setting sun cast a golden hue over the waves, creating a picturesque backdrop that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing within me. I had carefully chosen my outfit to be both casual and inviting, wanting to appear relaxed and approachable. When I saw Sarah approaching, her silhouette outlined against the fading light, my heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and dread. She greeted me with a warm smile, and I could see the tension in her shoulders ease as she took in my presence. We walked along the shoreline, the sand cool beneath our feet. The gentle lapping of the waves created a soothing rhythm, but beneath the surface a storm of emotions was brewing. We talked about our lives, our dreams, and our disappointment. Sarah opened up about her struggles with her marriage, expressing a deep sense of betrayal and confusion. Her vulnerability was palpable, and it only drew me closer to her. I listened with genuine empathy, offering comfort and understanding that, in hindsight, felt more like manipulation than compassion. As the evening wore on, the conversation grew more intimate. I found myself leaning in, my hand brushing against hers as we walked. Touch was electric, and I could see the way Sarah's eyes softened as she looked at me. The connection between us had become undeniable, and it was clear that she was feeling something more than just friendship. Eventually, we stopped and sat on the sand, the sound of the ocean providing a backdrop to our conversation. Sarah's head rested on my shoulder, and I could feel the warmth of her breath against my neck. It was a moment of pure, unspoken connection, and I knew that this was the point of no return. "I've never felt this way before," Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with a mix of longing and sadness. "I didn't expect to find someone like you." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had set out to destroy her marriage, but now I was faced with the reality of her feeling. The guilt began to gnaw at me, but I pushed it aside. I was in too deep, and the plan was already set in motion. I gently tilted her chin, our faces mere inches apart. The anticipation in her eyes mirrored my own desire. and I leaned in to kiss her. The kiss was tender at first, but it quickly grew more passionate as the intensity of our emotions took over. I felt a mix of triumph and anguish as our bodies pressed together, the boundaries we had crossed now undeniable. The affair continued, and each encounter with Sarah seemed to pull us both further into a web of deception and desire. We met in secret, always careful to avoid the prying eyes of the world. The thrill of our meetings was matched only by the guilt and fear that accompanied them. I knew that every stolen moment was a risk, and the weight of our actions hung heavy over both of us. Sarah's emotional state grew increasingly fragile. She was torn between her loyalty to her husband and the intense connection she felt with me. I could see the strain in her eyes, the way she would sometimes withdraw into herself after our encounters. It was clear that our affair was taking a toll on her, and the emotional turmoil was beginning to spill over into her daily life. One evening, as we sat in a dimly lit cafe, Sarah broke down in tears. The sight of her, so raw and vulnerable, struck a chord deep within me. I had set out to destroy her world, but now I was witnessing the collateral damage of my revenge. The lines between justice and cruelty blurred, and I found myself questioning the true cost of my action. "I don't know how much more I can handle," Sarah said between sobs. "I feel like I'm living a lie, and it's tearing me apart." Her words echoed my own feelings of despair and regret. I had become so focused on hurting James and Bella that I had lost sight of the person who was suffering the most, Sarah. The affair had started as a means of vengeance, but it had evolved into a complex and painful relationship that neither of us had anticipated. I held Sarah as she cried, my own emotions swirling in a confusing mix of guilt and anger. I had wanted revenge, but now I was confronted with the reality of the pain I had caused. The affair had taken on a life of its own, and the consequences were far more profound than I had imagined. As the days passed, the weight of our actions grew heavier. The secrecy of our meetings and the deception of our affair became a constant source of stress. I could see the toll it was taking on Sarah, and it mirrored the emotional turmoil within me. The lines between right and wrong had become indistinguishable, and the pursuit of revenge had left a trail of broken lives in its wake. One night, after a particularly intense encounter, Sarah and I lay in bed together, silence between us heavy with unspoken thoughts. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the chaos that had become our lives. The affair had started as a means of retaliation, but it had evolved into a painful and complicated mess. I knew that the end of the affair was inevitable. Deception, the guilt, and the emotional fallout were too great to ignore. As much as I had wanted to make James and Bella suffer, I found myself questioning the true cost of my revenge. The pain I had inflicted on Sarah was a harsh reminder of the consequences of my action. In the end, the affair with Sarah was a stark lesson in the complexities of human emotion and the destructive power of revenge. What had begun as a calculated plan to hurt James had evolved into a situation that left all of us emotionally scarred. The lines had been crossed, and the damage was far-reaching. As I faced the consequences of my actions, I knew that the emotional turmoil was only beginning. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of light across my bedroom. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with the consequences of the affair. The weight of the secret I had been carrying was becoming unbearable, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The previous night had been particularly intense. Sarah and I had spent hours talking about the future, about the impossibility of our situation, and the ever-growing tension between us. Despite our emotional connection, the reality of the situation was that our relationship was built on a foundation of deception and betrayal. As much as we tried to make sense of our feelings, the truth was always lurking just beneath the surface. My phone buzzed beside me, snapping me out of my thoughts. Picked it up and saw a message from Bella. Her words were simple. They conveyed a sense of urgency. "We need to talk. It's important." My heart sank. I knew that this conversation could only mean trouble, and the timing couldn't have been worse. I quickly got dressed and made my way to the cafe where Bella and I had spent so many hours talking in the past. As I walked, the weight of the impending confrontation pressed heavily on me. My mind raced with the possible scenarios: Bella finding out about the affair, the fallout with James, and the public scandal that seemed inevitable. When I arrived at the cafe, Bella was already there, sitting at a corner table with a troubled expression on her face. She looked up as I approached, her eyes searching mine for answers. I took a seat across from her, bracing myself for the conversation ahead. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I've been hearing rumors about you and Sarah." My heart skipped a beat. The news had already reached her. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "What have you heard?" Bella's eyes were filled with hurt and anger. "I heard that you and Sarah have been seeing each other, that you've been having an affair." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I tried to find the right words, but the guilt and shame overwhelmed me. "Bella, I don't," she interrupted, her voice rising with emotion. "I can't believe you'd do this. I thought we had something real. How could you betray me like this?" Her pain was palpable, and it mirrored the anguish I had felt when I discovered her infidelity. I tried to explain, to justify my actions, but the words seemed hollow in the face of her suffering. The conversation quickly spiraled into a heated argument, each of us lashing out with the raw emotions that had been building for weeks. As the argument reached its peak, Bella stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. "I can't do this right now. I need time to process all of this." She stormed out of the cafe, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a deep sense of regret. The next few days were a blur of chaotic emotions. News of the affair had spread, and the scandal was impossible to ignore. Sarah and I had tried to keep our relationship hidden, but the truth had a way of surfacing, and the public scrutiny was relentless. Everywhere I went, I could feel the judgmental stares and hear the whispers behind my back. James was livid. He confronted me with a fury that was both terrifying and justified. His accusations were sharp and unrelenting, and I could see the pain and betrayal etched on his face. The confrontation was a painful reminder of the chaos I had wrought, and it only added to the emotional turmoil that had become my daily reality. Amidst the chaos, Sarah was struggling to cope with the public fallout. The affair had become a topic of gossip, and the impact on her personal life was severe. She faced harsh judgment from friends and family, and the strain of the scandal was taking a toll on her mental and emotional well-being. Despite our connection, I couldn't help but feel responsible for the pain she was enduring. One evening, Sarah reached out to me, desperate to talk. We met at a quiet park, away from the prying eyes of the public. The tension between us was palpable, and the weight of the scandal hung heavy in the air. "I don't know how much more I can take," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "The gossip, the judgment, it's tearing me apart." I reached out to comfort her, my own emotions mirroring her distress. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never meant for any of this to happen. I wanted revenge, but I never anticipated the pain it would cause." Her tears were a reflection of the emotional wreckage that had resulted from our actions. The affair, which had started as a means of retaliation, had spiraled into a full-blown scandal that affected everyone involved. The sense of guilt and responsibility weighed heavily on me, and I struggled to find a way to make things right. As the days turned into weeks, fallout from the affair continued to unfold. Bella and James's marriage was strained beyond repair, and the public's perception of me was tarnished. The emotional scars left by the scandal were deep and enduring, affecting not only those directly involved, but also those on the periphery. The impact of the scandal was a harsh reminder of the far-reaching consequences of my actions. The web of deception I had woven had ensnared everyone around me, and the resulting turmoil was a testament to the destructive power of revenge. Despite the chaos and emotional upheaval, there was a small part of me that hoped for some semblance of redemption. I wanted to find a way to make amends, to repair the damage I had caused, and to seek forgiveness from those I had hurt. But as the scandal continued to unfold, it became increasingly clear that the path to redemption would be a long and difficult. In the midst of the turmoil, I found myself reflecting on the choices I had made and the consequences they had wrought. The affair had started as an act of revenge, but it had become a complex and painful ordeal that left a trail of broken lives in its wake. The emotional scars left by the scandal would take time to heal, and the road to redemption was uncertain and fraught with challenges. As I faced the reality of the situation, I knew that the true cost of my actions was far greater than I had ever anticipated. The scandal had exposed the fragility of human relationships and the devastating impact of betrayal. The emotional fallout was a harsh reminder of the complexities of revenge and the enduring consequences of our actions. The world seemed to spin in slow motion as I walked through the remnants of my life, now irrevocably altered by the chain of events set in motion by my quest for revenge. The once familiar landscape of my daily existence had been transformed into a battlefield of shattered relationships and emotional scars. Every step I took was weighed down by the heavy burden of the consequences I had brought upon myself and others. The fallout from the scandal had left a trail of devastation. Bella, devastated by my betrayal and the public humiliation of our private lives, had cut all ties with me. Our once promising future was now a distant memory, replaced by a void of unresolved hurt and anger. The emptiness of our relationship's end felt like a gaping chasm in my heart, a constant reminder of the pain I had caused. James, too, had been deeply wounded. His anger and sense of betrayal were palpable, and the once familiar camaraderie we had shared had dissolved into bitterness and resentment. The affair had shattered his trust, not only in me, but in the sanctity of his marriage. The weight of his pain and the dissolution of his relationship with Sarah were stark reminders of the collateral damage caused by my actions. Sarah, the woman who had been at the center of this storm, was also struggling to cope with the aftermath. The public scandal had taken a toll on her personal and professional life, and the emotional scars were evident in her weary eyes and strained demeanor. Despite our connection, the weight of the betrayal had cast a long shadow over our interactions. The affair, once a source of intense passion, had become a symbol of our collective downfall. The media coverage of the scandal had been relentless. The details of our affair were splashed across headlines, and the invasion of privacy was a constant source of distress. The public scrutiny had turned our personal lives into a spectacle, further compounding the emotional toll on everyone involved. In the midst of this chaos, I found myself grappling with a profound sense of isolation. Friendships and connections I had once relied upon had been severed, and I was left to navigate the wreckage of my life on my own. The isolation was a harsh reminder of the price I had paid for my actions, and the loneliness was a constant companion. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I found myself reflecting on the choices that had led to this point. The initial desire for revenge had seemed so justified, so clear-cut, but as the consequences unfolded, complexities and nuances of human emotions became painfully apparent. The pursuit of revenge had led to a chain reaction of suffering that extended far beyond my original intentions. I had wanted to hurt James and Bella to make them pay for the betrayal I felt, but in doing so, I had unwittingly caused pain to Sarah, James, Bella, and myself. The relationships that had once been a source of comfort and joy were now marred by betrayal and heartbreak. The emotional weight of the aftermath was almost unbearable. The guilt and regret were constant companions, and the knowledge that I had played a central role in this tragic narrative only deepened the sense of responsibility. I had set out to seek justice, but the consequences of my actions had proven to be far more complex and devastating than I had anticipated. As I looked back on the chain of events, I found myself questioning whether the pursuit of revenge had been worth the cost. The initial satisfaction of enacting my plan had quickly faded, replaced by a profound sense of emptiness and remorse. The emotional fallout had been more severe than I had imagined, and the realization that my actions had irrevocably damaged the lives of those involved was a bitter pill to swallow. Despite the turmoil, there was a part of me that clung to the notion that I had done what I believed was right. The sense of justice, however fleeting, had been a driving force behind my actions. Yet, as the dust settled and the reality of the consequences became evident, the notion of justice seemed increasingly elusive. I had sought to correct a wrong, to balance the scales of betrayal with my own brand of retribution. But in doing so, I had created a new set of wrongs, a complex tapestry of pain and suffering that had far-reaching implications. The lines between right and wrong had blurred, and the pursuit of vengeance had led to an outcome that was both unpredictable and heart-wrenching. The finality of the situation was undeniable. The relationships that had once been central to my life were now irrevocably damaged, and the emotional scars would take years to heal. The pursuit of revenge had been a journey marked by intense emotions and difficult choices, and the aftermath was a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of human actions. In the quiet moments of reflection, I came to terms with the fact that the consequences of my actions were a part of my journey. The emotional turmoil and the shattered relationships were the price I had paid for my pursuit of vengeance. As I faced the reality of my situation, I realized that the path to redemption would be long and arduous, and the road to forgiveness was uncertain. The story of my quest for revenge was one of profound emotional complexity, a tale of betrayal, guilt, and the unpredictable nature of human emotions. The aftermath of my actions was a stark reminder of the consequences of our choices and the enduring impact of betrayal. As I moved forward, I knew that the lessons learned from this experience would shape my future decisions and interactions, guiding me toward a path of healing and understanding. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. See you next time.